How are you doing? You know, some people think about art and they think, oh, I just need to learn how to do this, how to do that, how to acquire this skill, how to do that technique. How. But you know, it really isn't about the how. Or some people think, if I could just find the right subject, then I could be a great artist. What is it I need to do? What do I need to do? What? It isn't the what. Some of you might argue, it's the why, it's the meaning behind it. And it could be that. That could be the most important one. But the way that you get there is with a spirit of receptivity, with the idea of being empathetic towards the world, with the idea of being able to observe the world with great acuity, with a heart, with love for the world. That's what makes you an artist. And one of the absolute best ways I know to be part of the mystery of life and to share in the experience of just observation of the world is to draw the human figure. And there's a myriad of mysteries and forms in the human body that we'll begin to uncover today by going through artistic anatomy. So I invite you to join me. We're going to take on the skeleton today, and then we're going to move forward through all the muscles of the body as well. All right, thank you. Okay. Imagine with me for a moment that you can really draw someone, that you can just sit down and someone's sitting right in front of you and you can draw them. Or you can draw someone out of your head, like you understand the anatomy so well, all the muscles and all the bones, that you can just draw that out of your head. Maybe you want to design a wardrobe for a theater set, or maybe you've been asked to do the Stations of the Cross as a liturgical art commission. I mean, whatever it is, just imagine for a moment if you're really capable of drawing a person. Well, that's what we're going to take on today. We're going to begin to understand how to draw the human figure. And to go after that, we're going to take the words of the great anatomist and artist, curator of American paintings at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Robert Beverly Hale. He said, you can't draw a thing unless you know it exists, okay? So it's going to be good to have references, like George Bridgman is a great anatomist as well, and he's published lots of books. This is The Constructive Anatomy, and he's very great at being very structural, looking at the geometry of forms, okay? And but really, almost any anatomy book is great. This is one I have that. Plastic Arts Anatomy, Künstler, it's German, it's 19th century. I can't read it. I know a teeny bit of German, but I mean, beautiful drawings, okay. I mean, the best anatomy text would have great drawings, it would have great photo references. This is a nice one, Sarah Simblett. She's has Olympic athletes that are being photographed in this book. She does some of her own drawings as well. It has some nice overlays here. So you can see how the bones relate to the, here the scapulas are overlaid, front and back view. Here's one by Robert Beverly Hale, who I just mentioned. Okay. There's other sources online as well. Mettler is a great one to look up. But what I would get is I would get a great book that has really good photographic references, one that has great drawings of the figure, and then I would look for one that has great examples of master drawings, or just immerse yourself in the study of the art of the past. All right, so as we begin to take this on, now we're just going to take it sort of step by step. And what I'd like you to do is get out a sketchbook, get out a piece of paper, and draw along with me. Okay? And it's one thing to study the books, but it's another thing to actually do it. Okay? And we're going to first begin with the foundation of the skeletal structure. We'll start with the head, and we'll work our way through the whole body, and then we'll put muscles onto the body. And what we're going to be concerned about is artistic anatomy. This isn't anatomy of internal organs. It's anatomy of what we see on the surface, what to look for, how to understand planes so that you can begin to go after your values and to really build your drawings out of structure. Okay. All right, the first conception we want to go for here, sort of mass conception of how to go after the skull, is two basic forms. Really, there's four we'll take on overall, but right now we're going to talk about the cranium as a sphere, or pretty close to a sphere, and then kind of an ovoid or an egg shape that takes on all the features of the face. Okay? So to do that, what I'd like you to do is draw yourself a square, but think of it as a three-dimensional cube. And we're going to work with a proportion that's really like magical. Okay. We're going to look at the skull. Okay, this comes from Robert Beverly Hale and others as a unit. Okay, I mean Da Vinci, Albert Dürer, others had their proportion systems too. But with this one, it's really nice because it just lines up so often. This occurrence of the skull height matches skull width. Okay. And that skull width or height also gets you down the neck from the base of the skull to the 7th cervical vertebrae. This is the one you can really feel on the back of your neck that kind of pops out there. If you're looking from the front of the skeleton, that's the same length now, that skull width. And again, we're going to the wide part of the skull, or the skull height. If you come up inside here, that'll get you from the base of the skull to the beginning of the sternum, the top of the sternum. It'll also get you the length of the sternum, minus this little xiphoid cartilage, which doesn't really show anyway. But it gets you a sternum. Two of these gets you down to the 10th rib, the ones that protrude here that you'll see. It also aligns with the width of the clavicles, the collarbones. Two of these gets you down length of the upper arm. On a female, we're about 2 of these wide on the pelvis. 3 of these make up a length of a femur, and so on. So it's really a good way to begin to measure these things. And also skeletal landmarks are really important because you can kind of rely on them. They're not going to move all over the place, say like fleshy landmarks. Okay. All right, on this cube, so we're thinking about this as a skull width. 5 eyes wide, or the width of the cranium wide, same as the height. What I want you to draw there, and this is going to be a front view, is I want you to draw kind of a sphere here. Okay. Draw a sphere. We'll do the same thing. This will be our front view. This will be our side view. Again, draw a sphere like that. So I'm basically trying to fit my sphere to my cube. Okay. This will be a back view, so we'll have front, side, and back. On that cube there, we can kind of divide this up. I just mentioned 5 eyes wide. We could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 eyes wide. We could do the same thing kind of down here. Right? Just a little notch here too, I guess. That'll be important. I'm going to do that same thing over here. Going to mark, well, let's mark it over here. Five. You could do the same thing at the top. Also, we could do that over here. All right, now the skull. The skull is going to have if we track kind of width from front to back, it's wider towards the back, narrower towards the front. So when we go for this basic conception of the face, the sort of egg shape here to simplify it, we want to be narrower than the sphere that we just drew, the brain case, that cranium. So we're going to come down, and what we want to do is we want to come down about, we could divide this up too, but we want to come down about 2 more of these notches that we've made. And we'll do that same thing over here. All right, so front view, that egg shape's going to come down, narrower in the front, come back up, all right? On the side view here, we want to take and bring the line down to that first notch. This would be a top plane of the head, and then where we become more involved in the front plane is one eye width down. That is what you might call the widow's peak. Okay? And we're going to come down, we're going to come out about an eye's worth, again down about 2, and then come back up. Okay? You know, we could finish that out, but that's that conception of the egg and sphere. So from the back view, again, if we divide this up a little bit, we've got the egg shape coming down on the front side. Okay. If we wanted to go just to anchor this for a minute, we can have a neckline kind of come down like this, front and back. Now this idea of a sphere was known to the ancients. In fact, the first vertebrae here, the first cervical vertebrae is called the atlas. And think of Atlas holding the earth up. We'll also have kind of an ear hole right here at the base there, but right in front of that, boom, underneath, the neck's going to come forward and back to support the weight of the head. All right, so basic conceptions there. Let's go after some of the features of the face. So thinking about planes again, widow's peak, one eye down in the middle. That's the plane break over here from top to front. Anytime you have a change in planes, you can have a change in value, right? So that's a clue of where you might change your values to get a real dimensional form. And we can begin to start to feel that shape of the forehead, that kind of flatness here. It's going to come down, this 2 eyes here, okay, the next 2 eyes down. So that's kind of the shape you want to think about. And then right at the base here, so we're 3 eyes down now, we want to put in a little shape like this, called the glabella. Now this is a down plane. It's a down plane that, if you look at the brow, it's right beneath the brow, it will catch shadow. Okay? Now to take on the brow here, there's a whole ridge here, more prominent on a guy typically than on a woman, and we'll have kind of what are known as little bumps here. These are called eminences. This is the inner eminence. This is the outer orbital eminence. What we're going to go after here is the shape of the socket of the eye. Here's that glabella, that shape that's, you can see it's even in shadow here. We're going to create kind of a, I don't know, like a pilot's sunglasses sort of shape, right? 70s detective series show might have, right? Those sort of old pilot glasses. But I think there's a bit of a droop, a bit of a sense of the eye coming down to the outside. But kind of a plane up, across, diagonal, down, diagonal, back around and up again. Now these lines don't exactly meet on the inside here, but that's what we're going to take on. Another thing to point out while we're here with the forehead, very much you can see that inner and outer orbital eminence, very prominent on a male skull. On a female skull, those ridges aren't nearly as prominent, okay, of the brow. And the forehead is much more upright, okay, with and again, this is just generally speaking, okay, with gender and skulls, but you can see that the male skull is sloped back much more, and the female here is more upright. Generally, the bones are a little bit more robust, if you will, just a bit thicker on a male skull. What's interesting here, really interesting, you probably won't be able to see this real well, but it's very sharp along here. Again, typically on a female skull. And on a male skull, that opening of the orbit of the eye is much smoother. It's much more rounded on the guy. All right, so as we come out to the orbits of the eye here, what we want to do is be in this sort of middle two-eye section. The eye is going to come down about 2/3 of that, and the opening of the nasal bone will come up about 2/3. And then there's kind of a thin wafer right there in the middle. Let's take on the socket of the eye here. That's going to start right beneath these eminences here, right at that line right there. So we want to come up, kind of have a bit of a top, a bit of a drooping down to the outside, come on the inside here, and a corner coming back up again. Okay, so an angle up from glabella, across the top, begin to droop down, kind of have an outside corner, droop down again, come back up, and in there. Okay, that's more or less the shape of the socket of the eyes there. All right, so let's see what that looks like on the side view here. What we want to talk about again is the glabella. So we've got widow's peak, come down 2 eyes. Right here we'll have a little bit of the bump at the glabella. Is going to cut back underneath here. And then we're going to have the nose come out. It's maybe a little low. Have the nose come out. Down. This is the opening of the nasal cavity and back out. So let me clean that up here. So we'll clean up that bump. So right on that next notch down, so this is 2 from the widow's peak, a little bit of a bump out, glabella coming back, the nose coming out, and then back down like that. Okay. Now what's kind of neat right here is this sphere almost takes on a line that really exists on the skull. It's called the temporalis, or the temporal line. And it'll come out a little lower than that, but we could put that in right now. That's where we're going to insert the temporalis muscle. And it's what makes the head feel a bit more round in the front. Now we're wider to the back here. Okay, so then to take on a bit of the socket of the eye here, we want to think a little bit about an orbital eminence here, but we want to come down with the opening of the eye just below that eminence, and we want to kind of up, out, and around, and back, up and in. Okay. Now the temporalis line here, or the temporal muscle, will kind of come down, boom, boom, and then head back here. That's known as the zygomatic arch. The cheek of that is going to come down, pick up the lines a little bit, come down this way, right on that 5th point there, 5 eyes down, and it's going to kind of come up and back to the ear hole. Okay. Now this point right here, that's a really good one because it defines front plane, side plane, and underneath plane. So you have 3 planes of the skull there meeting in one point. Okay, so let's take that on in the front view here. Yeah, we can clean up that egg shape a little bit here. And we can take that temporalis line, boom, boom, and out to the cheek here, okay? Boom. And then down. Okay. Now what happens from there is the zygomatic's going to come underneath like this. And we're going to get a new shape on the head, which would be the cylinder of the maxilla of the upper mouth. So let's get that right on the corner too. Okay. All right, another thing to maybe refine the shape of the skull a little bit is it tends to be a little bit wider as you go up like that. Okay. So it kind of goes from a more of a narrow to a wide there. Probably looks a little better now, right? And then we want to do the same thing, thinking about on the side view here, refining the top of the skull. That I almost drew it that way, but this right here is a very sort of flat platform. And then you've got a little bit of a notch, a ridge right there. And then the skull comes up and around, and it tends to be higher towards the back and then slopes down. Okay? So we'll kind of keep that maybe more of the slope here. This is an attachment point for muscles of the neck. So go to the back view here. That ridge is going to run across the back of the skull here. And with a little bump right here called the Nuchal Crest. All right? And that's the little bump there, the Nuchal Ridge, the Nuchal Crest. Okay. And then if we want to refine the shape of the skull just a little bit again, remember we want to come up a little wider towards the top, narrower as we come down. So that can look a little more skull-like now, maybe. All right. What I wanted to show you is that right here, that Nuchal Crest, that point right there, that's the attachment point for some ligaments and muscles all along here, actually. But that helps to pull our head up straight. And as a two-legged, right, we don't have a spar, or, you know, if you walk around like this, then you really have to have a strong muscle, right? So if you look at this, these are all casts, by the way. This is a green sea turtle. Here's that same attachment point for the muscles of the neck of this little guy to pull his head up. So it's pretty fun to see these variations. Here's a loggerhead. It's the meat-eating turtle of the great sea turtles, and you can see how big that connection point is again. On our skull, right, you just almost don't even see it on the back of this one. All right, now here's sort of this is a flat-faced cave bear that was around in the Pleistocene, so the last ice age. So 11,000 years ago, here on the plains, this was a contender. Well, top of the food chain, really. But look at the massive Nuchal ridge and crest and attachment point for the muscles that would hold this guy up. 6 feet at the shoulder, this bear was. You can get on YouTube and people have animated the short-faced cave bears fighting with the saber-toothed tigers. All right, what I want to go after now is the mastoid process. This is a bump. Now we had little bumps here, but a bigger bump here coming down is called the process. Comes up kind of like that, right behind the ear hole. Okay? This is a spot where you attach major muscles of the neck. So it's an attachment point. And we'll see that from the front of the skull as well. So that will hang below the fifth line by a little bit. The mastoid process. And we'll definitely see these guys on the back here as well. All right. Okay. Now what we want to do is take on, but maybe it's best over here first. So we've got this thin wafer in the middle of the nose here, the nasal cavity. We've come down to that fifth line. We're about an eye out. We're going to go in and out down to the line between the teeth, right, the opening of the mouth. And where that we're going to find that is about a third of the way down between the next two marks that we made from the fifth. Down here, right, one skull height, not halfway down, but about a third of the way down is where we want to put the opening of the mouth. So in and out with the teeth. So we were out on the uppers, in on the lowers, back out to catch a bit of the chin, and back around. Then we can refine the shape of the jaw a little bit there too. The jaw is kind of a triangular opening where it has three facets to it: a front, a plane going back, and another plane going back. So more like three angles there. Okay. So as we draw this in, what we want to do is here, clean that up a little bit again. As we come back to this first corner there, we want to be rising up a little bit. And then we'll take the next corner, come up again, and we're going to come up right in front of the ear hole. And I'll show you this on the skull in a minute, but this is the joint for the jaw right here. It goes in behind Zygomatic Arch. It's called the Temporal Mandibular joint. And that's going to come down. Then we're going to come up again. And this will, again, insert itself behind the Zygomatic Arch. It's a little point there called the Coracoid Process. Comes back down, something like that. So we're about a third of the way across the jaw with that line coming down. And then we go after teeth. All right, so, well, let's, all right, a little smile there. Let's take on the jaw from the front. Now let's go ahead and do the teeth. So the dentition pattern, if you will, is going to be two incisors, each side of the middle, one canine, two bicuspids, and three molars. So it's a lot of teeth to draw. And as we come around, of course, we're not going to see much of the first incisors, but they would be two incisors. Then we would have a canine that's going to stick up a little higher. Then we have two bicuspids. And then we'll have three molars. Okay. And then the same thing on the bottom. So we've got two incisors, and we've got a canine that will also hang a little bit lower. Two bicuspids. And three molars. We get some teeth on a skull and it really starts to look like a skull there. All right. Let's do this on the front again. We talked about the zygomatic arch coming down. And so we really have over here, we really have a quality of a cylinder sticking out here. So you know, sort of feel this going around like a tuna fish can or something. Right here, a third of the way down. So we want to be, let's fix our jaw a little bit too. We want to catch the front, then we want to head back, and then we want to head back again. Back, and back again. A coronoid process would be closer to us. That'll come down like this, behind the zygomatic. And then we'll go after, okay, so from the front here, we'll really see two incisors. All right, 1, 2 on each side of the middle. Then we'll get a couple of canines on each side, 1 on each side. Below the lower canines. Then we start going around on that cylinder. All right, a couple of bicuspids and the 3 molars going back. So 2 bicuspids following the canines. Okay. And that's getting pretty close there. We might square up the jaw a little bit on the back view. So we come down, catch a corner, square up in the front, catch a corner, back up again, and there we have it. Right in here's the Foramen Magnum. That's the big opening of the spine and all the nerves there. All right. I feel like my zygomatics are just a little low here. I think I want to come down just a little bit more. They just seem a little tall there. Probably looks a little better, right? Outside of the jaw, there's our mastoid processes. I mean, there's other details you can take on, right? We started to define these inner and outer orbital eminences. If you really sort of put those on there, you can give a lot of expression to your skull. And there's little holes you could go after too if you want. There's one right above the ridge of each eye, a couple of here in the cheeks. We won't see these things as they on the surface, of course, when you have skin over bone. All right, so let's talk about working our way down the neck here. Let me point out those last couple of things first. All right, here's the shape of the zygomatic arch. Coming around, you get about 2 fingers in there. You can see that the eye droops down. We got the corner here, 1 plane, 2 plane, down plane, right? Side, front, and underneath. The cylinder shape, right? So we had sphere, egg, cylinder, and then much more of sort of the triangle here of the jaw. With the jaw, a male jaw, actually here's the temporal mandibular joint. Here's the coronoid process coming down, teeth picking up, going in behind there. You can see that there's kind of that front, the squareness to the jaw, out and again. So maybe 3 planes on a more of a typical female jaw. It's a little more pointy in front, less sort of those 3 planes, right? A little more pointy on a female mandible. All right, on the teeth, if you have a 3rd molar, you might really want to push that just a bit behind where the coronoid process comes down here. On the 3rd molar, lowers and uppers on that cylinder. All right, let's talk about the neck for just a little bit. And of course, that's part of the spine. You have 7 cervical vertebrae here before you have vertebrae that start hooking onto ribs. Okay, so these 7, in fact, it's interesting, even like giraffes will have 7 cervical vertebrae. It's just, they're bigger than ours. Okay, this top guy here is called the atlas. It's the one that holds up the earth, right, the cranium. And it's quite wide, and you can see that maybe you can see it here. It's got a couple of like saddle holders. And there's these two guys right here around the Foramen Magnum. These bumps right here rest in those little notches, those saddles. And that's the kind of motion we can do, is it allows you to say yes. And then just beneath that is the axis. Okay? And so you have the up and down and the side to side with the axis, C3, C4, C5, C6. The seventh cervical vertebrae is a big skeletal landmark. It's right on the back of your neck there. You can really feel and find that bump on your own neck, I'm sure. So let's draw this in now. All right, what we want to go after here are those 7 cervical vertebrae. What we want to think about is the angle on a living human being. The neck is going to curve underneath the sphere, the weight of the skull. So we'll have a front. The atlas is holding up the world here, right? The sphere, and it's going to come out, and it has a couple of shallow saddles in it. There's a couple of knobs right outside the Foramen Magnum that's going to rest on. And it's going to come out just like this a little bit. And then we've got the axis bone. That's going to have, these are called dorsal spines. It's going to have a little bit of a thicker guy here. And then basically we want to come down 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And on the 7th cervical vertebrae, that's where we have that really big bump on the back of the neck that you can feel on your own neck. Each of these vertebrae, there's the dorsal spine, and then there's the transverse spines, or the spinous processes. So we'll kind of try to take that on just a little bit here. And then we're going to take on each of these dorsal guys. And then we'll have on the front here just a little bit of cartilage that would come out. Something like that. We'll go take on the same idea with the front here. The neck is going to be narrow at the top, a little wider at the bottom here. We probably are only going to see the bottom 4, maybe, vertebrae. There's a good 3 or 4 at the top will be covered. What's happening here is we have atlas, axis, and then C3 and C4. Then we might start to see 5, 4, 5, something like that. Okay? So let me go after a couple of details here too. We're going to have this kind of shape like that. It's going to hook in on this kind of like this. Then we're going to have the next one, and the transverse or spinous processes. Then we're going to have the next one. And then right up here, right underneath the chin here, would be a free-floating bone called the hyalid that will tie it in later. It would stick out right here underneath the chin, maybe angling down a little bit. has no attachment point to any other part, any other bone. And then let me just wrap up here. All right, okay, let's go on to the back view. Again, the Foramen Magnum is going to sit right in here. So the center of the spine would come right up this way. A little bit wider to each side as you come down. And then let's go after this too. So the axis, sorry, the atlas is going to be a very wide bone. Again, it's got these saddles here that the two knobs here of the skull can rock back and forth upon. Then we've got axis, much bigger. Get rid of this. We won't see the chin from the back. We have a little bit of a kind of a flare here. I guess a little bit of a sort of almost like a butterfly shape to it. And then the same idea again, we'll take on the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. And the seventh one, again, the knob is going to be right here, that seventh cervical, very prominent. Basically what happens is the muscles go around it, and that's why it rises to the surface, and it's such a nice boating landmark there. So we're going to draw that guy in. And each of these is going to have this dorsal spine, and then the transverse, or the wings, the spinous processes coming out. Each time we want to kind of flare down, a bit like the bottom wings of a butterfly maybe. And then sort of flare up too, so it's kind of like this, and coming around, like this, coming around, like this, coming around, like this, coming around. All right, let's go after the rib cage a little bit. Here, what we're going to work on is we'll take on the front, side, and back. On the front here, we have ribs connecting to the sternum. The sternum, we'll go over the three parts of that. Collarbones resting on the top of the sternum. Cartilage coming off of the sternum, connecting each of the first 5 ribs individually, and then the rest down to the 10th rib share cartilage. 6 and 7 still are considered directly connected to the sternum. 8, 9, and 10. And then 11 and 12 are free floaters. Sometimes there's an extra one, sometimes there's a missing one, I guess. But what we'll see here, though, is that 10th rib is a big landmark. When you'll see that on an individual there. This whole angle when someone breathes in, this sort of entering angle of the ribs is really important. If we come on the back side here, we'll see that the ribs have a quality of going down. They're coming off the spinuous, these transverse processes here, and coming sort of inserting, I should say coming off of them, but inserting right between here and coming down. The scapulas will take on too, so sort of this out, down, and around. But you can probably see even in the light here, there's kind of an out and then around. There's this shape here. It kind of follows the scapulas at a resting point that defines back plane to side plane. And you have that in the front too. So just kind of where the cartilage is, maybe a little bit after that, but right in there, front to side. Okay, so, and then from a side view, you get that plane change from side to front and side to back happening along those ribs too. All right, and I just kind of wanted to show you too that to have a conception of couple of things here. The rib cage, it really has a trajectory of down and forward. If we could get this skeleton to be alive, it would be much more like that with the lumbar vertebrae really pushing forward underneath the rib cage, and the rib cage really pushing, there we go, pushing out like that. So there's this trajectory down and out. And then that's countered when we get to the pelvis by the pelvis going in the other direction. The other thing I want to show you is this shoulder girdle. We're not going to take on the arm quite yet, but the scapula and clavicles really are part of this that we're going to be drawing now. You can see just how curved the collarbones are here and how they rest on the spine, it's called, of the scapula here. So it's a big opening, this big shoulder girdle. And of course, it has implications if you're drawing someone from below, what happens with these arch shapes, or from above, okay, the contours of those. So diagrammatically, we might get a little bit more straight with them, but you want to think of them as very dynamic, curving, sort of S-shaped bones. All right, so you're going to need to draw 4 cubes, like I have here, 2 across from each other and then coming down again. This is the same dimension as the skull width and height, and you're going to do that here, and 1 column down here. 2 cubes there, all right? And then we're going to begin to take on the ribs. So the ribs at the top, the opening at the top of the ribs is about 4 eyes wide, so not quite the width of the skull there. And we want to just kind of swing that opening around here. Okay. That will be the opening of the ribs. We want to make a mark right here or over here, about an eye down from the top of the box. And what that will be is the wide point of the rib cage. So when we come down here, it's a very kind of ovoid or egg shape. We're going to come out, 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 out. We're not going to make it quite to the edge of the ribs, and then we'll come back in. So that's where you want to head with it. Out, out, wide point right there, coming back in. Very similar on the back, except the ribs, rather than going up and around, are already up, and they're going back down and around here. Okay, 4 eyes wide again. Okay, make your little marks if you want to, about an eyes down from that 5-eye line. So out, 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 wide, coming back. Out, 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 wide point, and back. Okay. Over here on the side view, well, we could go after the ribs here. I want to kind of talk about the sternum, because that will influence the shape there. So let's come back over here for a second. The sternum is going to sit right underneath the cervicals, and it has a shape to it that looks a little bit like a shield. It has a little bit of a down here in the middle, and then it has a couple of sides that the collarbones are going to rest on. Okay? And then it comes out like this and out like this. This is more, you start to see a bit of that shield shape there. We're going to put our first 2 ribs on here and here, and then it kind of wants to come back in. Maybe something like that. This part of the sternum is called the Manubrium. It's what the Greeks saw as the handle of a knife. And the blade of the knife is the next part. It comes down like this. And that's the gladiolus. And then at the bottom of the gladiolus is a little bit of a xiphoid process, or what we call the ensiform cartilage. It doesn't really show up so much, but that's the sternum. Okay, 3 parts to it. So when we come over here to the side view, what we'll see is we've got really like 3 angles. So the sternum's going to go out. That's the manubrium, gladiolus, ensiform cartilage. Okay. The trajectory of the ribs again is thrusting forward. So we've got that opening right here underneath our cervicals. So the rib cage is going to head out Then it's going to turn angle, and it's going to cross in front of our box, maybe by about an eye's worth. And at that Y point, head back down, and up and around again. Something like that. All right. Then on the front here, we can maybe hang our clavicles down. So they're going to rest right on the top of these on the manubrium here. Right here is going to be the inside of the clavicle, and then it's going to go out basically just about to the end of the box. That's one collarbone. And then this one will be resting right in there. Okay. Okay. Taking that from the side view here, in our manubrium, we want to rest the collarbone right there. Now it's going to be coming out, a lot of foreshortening here, really coming out towards us. Right? So there's that ball of it coming out right there. What it rests on, in fact, we can even draw it from the back side here. So think about resting on the manubrium here, collarbone coming out, collarbone coming out. It's going to be resting on the scapula. So why don't we take on the scapula now? What that's going to look like is it's kind of I guess a big triangle, if you will. Right? This is the interior blade. Now none of this is sort of screwed in to your shoulder blades. I mean to your rib cage. The shoulder blade is loose, and the articulation for the whole shoulder girdle is right here, where your collarbones rest on the sternum. So when that rotates the whole collarbone, and if you raise your shoulders up high enough, it will rotate these guys out. So you've got a little bit of maybe a shoulder pad, a little bit of a protection here for a very shallow ball and socket of the arm. But once your arm comes up about halfway or a little less, see how it hits this spine of the scapula, then the whole spine is going to rotate out. And we'll look for how to find these landmarks when we put on the muscles here. But you can find these pretty easy, the spine and scapula and right down here. So we want to go after drawing this on the back first. And when we talk about the angle of ribs, when we talk about the back to the side view, the way these are going to turn around for us, we'll have a kind of a line that defines the plane here. So what I'm drawing there is an implied plane from back to side. And that is a nice place to put the resting point for the scapulas. So there's a kind of a corner to them, but then they'll rest down like this. Then when they get down here, they kind of round out a little bit. You want to take that detail. And then up here, what's going to happen is they'll come back down like this. And that way the collarbones can rest on top of them. And then there'll be a knob on the front side that we'll draw there. But then you can take this guy down, and this is where we're going to have that spine of the scapula. It's going to go out this way, and it has some real thickness to it. Okay? So this will stick out a little further than the collarbones. Okay, something like that. Sticking out to about the corner of the box. And then you just kind of want to come up a little bit rounded here, and then up, a little bit rounded here, and then up, And then right inside here, we'll have the shallow socket of the ball and socket of the arm. Okay. There. Okay. All right, let's go to the front here. We'll still have the influence of the spine of the scapula showing up, coming out to meet the collarbones here. So let's kind of imagine that resting angle of the ribs here, the scapula coming up and right along here. We're going to have that shallow socket. And then we're going to have a knob that we could draw right in here. And we can do that same thing up here. Shallow socket. And then right above that, this is called the coracoid process. I'll draw that a little better. Coracoid process. And we'll be attaching some muscles to that. Then that spine of the scapula is, we could see through there, kind of doing that. So it's going to come up right about here so the collarbone can rest on it on each side. Okay? All right. And then on the side view over here, spine of the scapula resting on the back of the ribs, coracoid process, collarbone coming out. So the collarbone is going to come out here. Spine of the scapula is coming up underneath here. Kind of a nice big flare shape. And then that's going to reach back. What we want to do is take on the hollow socket. And then we have the coracoid process coming off there. And then we want to just kind of come down and out. And then back here, this would come up and rest right over the ribs like that. Okay. All right, let's take on the front of the ribs here. At the top, we're going to have the first set of ribs that, well, before we get into those details, let's talk about sort of the entering angle of the ribs. How do the ribs finish up down here? We're going to have a 1 through 5. All these ribs are going to share. Well, they each go to their own separate connection on the sternum. It's 6 and 7 that will also be on the sternum. 8, 9, and 10 are just connected by cartilage. So the 5th rib is the last one that's an individual rib coming down here. So it's going to come down like that and then go up and around. Right? And then we'll have 4 do that. 3, 2, and then we've got 1 right along the side here that's coming around and going up like that. So what happens, you can kind of see, you start to get this, that plane break where the ribs come down and then they go to the side. Okay. So 6 and 7 are going to come off of here too. And then 8, 9, and 10. Why don't I take that on the other ones and then I'll try to fill that in a little bit better. Again, the fifth rib is going to angle down and come back up. And we've got fourth, third, second, and the first one right at the base of the sternum. Okay. Up and around. Now we'll have 6 and 7. Even 7 will start underneath the shoulder blade there. And they're going to come off that right before the xiphoid process here. And then 8, 9, and 10 there. Okay. Get that down a little bit more. And on the back side, we're going to have a quality of the ribs coming down. So 5 is going to come down and around. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, coming back around. And then they really kind of get steep here. 8. Okay, I'm going to come in here and speed up the video a bit as I detail each of the ribs in the rib cage. I'm working on the front view now. I'm going to concentrate on the cartilage, the ribs coming around, so down, back up and around. And then I'll go to the back view and finish that out too. All right, now on the back side view, you can take on as much detail as you'd like in the vertebrae of the spine, going after the thoracic and spinous processes. Remember, it's the 7th rib that's going to come down and just catch the bottom of the scapula. That's known as the inferior angle of the scapula. It's the 5th rib that comes down and at its lowest point hits the bottom of our cube there. So as you're drawing from the back, have the ribs as they go away from the spine go down and then come back up around as they go towards the front. There's a lot of detail there. Take on as much as you like. We're going to take on next the pelvis, which is composed of 3 parts. There's the ischium, which has a couple knobs on the bottom. So if you're sitting right now, you're probably sitting on your ischiums. It has a ilium, that's this plate here, and then the sacrum, which is this back part here, kind of a back triangle. The ischium and the ilium, I sort of think of as like a propeller on an airplane. So it's sort of got 2 fins that are twisted, right? And you have that on each side. Right, the large opening here, pubic symphysis. Okay, ischiums again, this is where the legs are going to insert the heads of the femurs. So let's try to draw this. Oh, I do want to say it's just so critical to get this right, because there are going to be bony landmarks that don't change. You can find pubic symphysis, you can find these front pelvic points, the back posterior pelvic points down to the sacrum, the tip of the sacrum here. Those are all landmarks that give you sort of a triangle, and if you get that triangle, you got angle, aspect. All right, so to take on the pelvis here, we can put a couple of little spots or landmarks on here that will help us do this. If you want to just quickly put a little spot or a notch right in the middle of each of your four squares here, that will help us find some things. So what we're going to do is from the front pelvic point, we're going to go up and around to the back and coming back. Okay. to about a third of that line. So we'll have a third ilium. And we can do the same thing here. We'll start on the front pelvic point, same idea. We want to ride up and come to the high point and come back down there. And then right in here is where we would begin thinking about the sacrum. Okay, so if we want to kind of extend our spine down, we've got 12 thoracic vertebrae, and then in here we're going to have 5 lumbar. The spine that we just drew here is coming really forward and back here. Okay? And then what we're going to do on the ilium here is, here's our front pelvic point, here's our wide point, here's our high point. So we're going to go front pelvic point, wide point, high point, and then sort of coming back around like that. Okay. And then what we're going to draw here is the sacrum coming down. Sacrum is going to come down to the middle. Okay. So it's sort of, I mean, it has a kind of a shape to it, but you could kind of go with a triangle there too. Well, we can do it here too. So the sacrum coming out, and the sacrum has a quality of being on a curve here. It's not, that triangular shape is on a curve, on a, almost like a spherical shape. Okay, on the front here, the pubic symphysis is meets right down here, halfway down this cube in the center. Okay. And so what that means is we want to have this opening of the ilium is going to come down, and we're going to come around like this. Okay. And this will have a bit of a thickness to it. Okay. So as we kind of make our way down here, there's going to be another little bump, and then this is going to continue down to the ischium, but you want to sort of just feel this ridge that comes across here. So we're very front now, and now we're heading a little bit back again. Okay. So anterior superior bump, and then we have a little bump underneath called the anterior inferior bump. The ischiums kind of go in the middle of your box, maybe an eye up or so. That will be the resting point that we talked about where you might be sitting on right now. Okay, so what's going to happen here is the ischiums, and they have a knob to the bottom. They have a kind of a thickness to them. And then what we'll have in here is kind of these openings, these sort of architectural features, if you will. Of course, they have a medical name, the obturator foramen. Sort of like flying buttresses or something like that. Okay, then if we take our wide point and come down to the bottom of the ischium, so something like that, we could almost just draw a line, to be honest. But let's do that real quick. And then you look at that distance, and you look about halfway down, and right under that is where we will put the big socket for the ball and socket of the leg. So of course we can refine that shape a little bit now, but that's where it goes. Okay? All right, and then we can do the same thing on the other side. So thinking about halfway down, right? Then we can, again, go ahead and draw a line up, or we can just kind of take it, draw in that big socket there. Okay. And in fact, as you sort of come around here on the ilium, we could almost sort of put a ridge here and make these have really big knobs. Those front pelvic points, I'll mark them with yellow here. critical landmarks, understanding the pose. Okay? And then pubic symphysis makes up our front pelvic triangle. Okay? The anterior superiors of the iliac spine down to the pubic symphysis there. Okay. All right, let's see if we can take that on in a side view, and then we'll come back around and do the back view. All right, so pubic symphysis is going to sit out front here. So we've got the major knob of the anterior superior iliac spine. Then we want to go for a little minor knob. It's the inferior bump. And then we're going to come in, and then we want to go all the way back out again. Okay? And then right along the front edge of our box will be pubic symphysis. Okay? Then we'll come back down. Remember, our ischiums are going to be right in the center, again, about an eyeball up. So coming down like this. And then it's going to have a kind of a quality to it here where as this kind of comes down, let's clean that up here. We want to go from the, let's put it in a wide point to the bottom of the ischium. You think of a little less than half, right below halfway. There's our, it's called the acetabulum. The Greeks saw that as a little vinegar cup, how they referred to that. Well, we've got this great big kind of coming around here, and this kind of opening like this, and a couple of bumps, and then out, and then the bottom of the ischium, something like that. Okay. And of course, the sacrum will have a thickness to it here. And of course, our spine will too. And so the weight of the ribcage is coming forward, the bend of the spine, and then the pelvis pointing forward. This kind of sense of coming forward. Okay. So we've set our high points right in the middle of each of these squares. And then we want to think about again, the same idea, the eye up from this line here. That will be our wide point. Come in about a quarter of the way here, or an eye again maybe. And that will be coming around to the front pelvic points. Okay? We can also think about sort of dividing the pelvis up in thirds. Okay? So maybe about right here to about right here. A little wider on a female than on a male, but this center part will be the sacrum, and then these two wings will be the iliums. Okay? And then we'll come down here. So to catch all of this, what we want to do is come up to the high point, and then maybe just inside of that high point there, we're going to come down and we're going to draw a couple of great big knobs. And then we're going to take, I guess we could do that one over here too. Then we're going to take right around the ilium. So from the back, we're moving towards the front now, to the wide point, coming around to the front pelvic point. Okay? So we're going away from us towards the front of the skeleton to the wide point and the front pelvic points. Okay. And of course, the spine's coming down here. Okay. Right at the end of the ribs, there would be 12 of those thoracic vertebrae. And then we have 5 lumbars. And we would probably have, about 2. And once we're below the ribs, we have about 3 of the lumbar vertebrae. Then what we want to do is we want to bring in the sacrum here. So it would come in kind of like a triangle here, but we can refine that a little bit too. We can kind of sort of flare out a little bit like this and like this, and then there's kind of a, well, let's put in the ischiums real quick. Right in the center of each of these boxes, okay, about an eye up. boom, and boom. It'll be easier for us to hook this up if we find this first, I think. So the wide point down, remember this, we did this on the front of the pelvis. The wide point down to the ischium, we could almost draw a line there. And then halfway, right, halfway down, that's where we would have the socket of where the leg bone is going to insert itself. But on the back side, we really almost see it more coming out other than a socket. It's a little bit of the outside of the rim of the crater, if you will, of the opening. And so we could do that same thing over here. Wide point down. And then we're going to have a little flare out there. Then at the bottom of the ischiums, remember these guys are kind of knobbish. Okay? So I'm going to come down, create a couple of knobs here. And then these go back up forward into the pubic symphysis. Remember that's halfway up here. So this is on the front side of the skeleton again. Okay, so we're going to come down. And there's a little thickness to this too. All right. And then, so our sacrum that we were trying to get back to here is going to come down like this. I mean, you could just draw a triangle and sort of get there, but maybe it flares out a little bit. And then we would have the coccyx, or the tailbone, just kind of extending down there. All right. So that will insert right up here. We'll have, it could kind of flare that too as it fits into the fifth of the lumbar vertebrae. Coming up, little knob, coming up a little knob. If we were really going for a detail here, we could take out our box, and we would have these little openings kind of coming up here. So sacrum has a roundness to it too, a curvature to it. You're sort of cutting out a triangle on a sphere or an egg sort of shape. All right, so coming all the way back to what we started here was that right around the ilium, front, wide point, high point, and we came back in, we had these knobs. Right underneath here, we're going to come down at an angle, then we're going to kind of flare up and around, and then we're going to kind of come down like that. So up, down, and then what's really happening here is these guys are kind of coming and spinning forward. And we'll have a bit of an opening here where we would see the obturator foramen, or the big holes on the front of the pelvis. Those would be located right here. That's probably most of it there. Okay. Let me clean that up a little bit. Clean that up a little bit. These look a little tall to me. Maybe I'll bring those down just a little bit. A little more wing on the iliums. One last thought as I was looking at this. Let's come back here and we have the greater sciatic foramen, that big opening in the front of the pelvis. That's going to come around here. We want to sort of maybe indicate that to meet right here on the front of the pubic symphysis. Okay. All right, the next set of drawings we're going to do are the leg bones. So we're going to work our way down from the pelvis. What you'll need to draw is another 3 boxes coming down. Now the trick here is we have to sort of reset a little bit. Okay. So rather than draw your box extending from here, we have to shift up to where the leg is going to insert itself into the pelvis. Okay, so at that ball and socket joint, so in other words, halfway, before we get going on the legs, let's take a look at that sacral triangle on the back. So we have the front pelvic triangle. Now I want to take a look at the sacral triangle. These 2 ends that we drew here on the back side, they call the posterior superior, the iliac spine. Those bumps become the top 2 points of the triangle. The third point is at the end of the sacrum here, where the coccyx tailbone begins. So if we draw that on here, we can connect those 2 ends and come down. And that is a triangle with 3 bony landmarks. These will look more like indents on the figure, but you can find that triangle, and then as soon as you've got that, you can tell, right, angle, aspect, rotation. It's a wonderful way to be able to see the pelvis, looking for those three marks making the triangle. Let's talk about the leg bones. We have, of course, the upper leg here is the femur. It's the longest bone in the body. Great big ball to go in the great big socket there. A bit of a neck coming out for leverage, to be able to do this, the muscles here. And then this knobby, squarish thing called the trochanter. It's a significant bump. You can find it on yourself. It's a little bit behind, towards the back from your front pelvic point, down a little bit. But you can find both of these. These are both important contours when you're drawing the figure. The leg bone comes forward a little bit and ends up in 2 knobs or spools. Maybe you can see here the spools point towards the back. Okay. And then while we're at it, let's take on the lower leg. Here's tibia. Here's the patella, the kneecap. Here's the tibia. It has a bump here. You see it kind of from the side. That's a kneeling point that you're resting on when you kneel. The fibula attaches to the tibia underneath this sort of cap, this platform, towards the back. It has kind of a squarish, ballish head here. Very thin bone, known as the needle bone, the fibula. More of a teardrop shape down here at the ankle strap. So the outside of your ankle, and then the tibia forms the inside ankle. Okay? So those two bumps there, the one on the outside is lower than the one on the inside. Okay? Also, I was going to say that this cap, this platform of the tibia, has a couple of saddles to it that these spools of the femur are going to rotate on, right? So you get that kind of action. All right. When we look at the skeleton from the side, you'll see that the tibia, if you come up to the femur here, the ball is maybe a little bit forward when we get it in the socket there of the trochanter, but you can really see in the femur here this rotation forward and back, this arch that supports the weight of the figure. And then lastly, thinking about the weight, again, you can stand and sort of knock your knees together, right? You can see how the leg bones, I put them in their sockets here, they're still going to come at quite an angle towards your knees, towards your center of gravity, to support your weight and come down. Okay? So again, we've got our acetabulas, those big, the socket of the ball and socket. Let's go ahead and draw a ball in there. And then we want to come out to the end of our box here and kind of square it up. That'll be the trochanter. On the underneath, we can kind of probably give it a little more of a flare here. And now, very interestingly, the leg bone is going to come like this. So when you're standing in a sort of a medical position, right, sort of erect position, your knees are actually touching. Okay, so, but your legs, the femur always angles like that. That's how your weight is supported. So we're going to come down the full 3 lengths here. Remember, we started with our box here. So 1, 2, 3. All right. And at the bottom of the femur, we want to think about those spools being about half of the width of that box there. Okay, and maybe a little bit more of a flare out here. 2 spools like that, and then we'll come down with the inside of the femur. Okay. All right, and we can do the same thing on the other side. So ball to go in our socket there. Whoops. Kind of come out with that neck a little bit. Square up to the head of the trochanter. A little flare there. We're going to have a little bit of a neck come down. And then to the outside, we're going to again square up a little bit on the trochanter. Come down, and then we'll flare out. Again, the spools here a little higher maybe on the inside. Kind of put on a roundish quality to them. That's your trochanters right here and here. Two really important landmarks on the skeleton. All right, let's go to the side view here. From the side view, we'll have the ball going in the socket first. So we can kind of think that, but we'll be coming towards us with the trochanter. So here's the ball. The neck would come out a little bit, and we could probably push the trochanter a little bit behind the ball. So we'll have this kind of squareness here of the trochanter. Okay, and then when we come down, we want to come down with the leg bone pushing forward and then back again. So the head of the trochanter, first ball, neck. And that spool is going to reach all the way back to the back of the box there. So the leg bone will be covering all of that. Pelvis. Okay, and then from the back view, kind of the same idea again. So we've got ball socket, ball going with the pelvis towards the front there. We're going to have the neck coming out, trochanter reaching the edge of the box. Then we're going to come down at an angle. And then we're going to put a ball on the end, one spool. So we got ball, neck coming out here. Femur coming down, knob. Now these knobs will be a little more pronounced from the back, so you could probably put those sort of spools on there a little more. And then there's a little gap between them. Again, about halfway. Kind of square that up a little bit. Halfway across our box for the width. All right, same thing over here. So imagine the ball in here, the neck coming out to the trochanter, hitting the edge of the box, and then we're going to come down. And then we're going to have a ball out to the outside, ball, neck to the inside here, femur coming down, a little bit of a knob there. Then we can kind of round that up here, one spool, second spool. And that gets us down to the knee. Now right above the knee, we've got a patella. It's going to sit above the knee here. And it has kind of a shield shape to it. So I guess a roundish shield shape. Something like that would probably get you there. It's maybe just a little bit pointy on the top, but very roundish. And then from our side view, of course, we could catch a little bit of the patella here. Maybe even angle it back just a teeny bit there. Okay. Now we'll have a common tendon that we'll be able to attach to the lower leg and move it. All right, let's take on the lower leg now. We'll start with the tibia, and we'll then add the fibula. So we talked about there's a platform here that the knobs or the spools of the femurs rest on. So we can draw the top platform of the tibia. And then it really is kind of a platform. It has a quality of maybe reaching a little further out from the inside, than the outside. And it kind of comes to there's a kneeling point right here, but it really kind of comes to a kind of if you did a cross section, kind of a triangular shape here. It's very pointy in the front. And the way I kind of think about that front of the triangle, that pointy part of the tibia, kind of goes in and out, okay? And then the tibia is going to come down. And what we want to do at the bottom here is we want to leave, in this bottom box, not quite half, a little less than half for the foot, okay? The bones of the foot. So as we come down here, the tibia is going to come down, and then, again, it's going to reach a little further onto the inside. This is where the strap is going to be, and it's going to flare out a little bit there too. Okay. And so when the tibia comes down here, we talked about it kind of having a pointy front, a triangular shape at the top. But by the time it gets down to the bottom here, it's where it forms that strap, especially to the inside, it's much more squarish. So you're going from a triangular form to a squarish form. Okay? And not so round there. Okay? So that kneeling point, I'm kneeling right now, right in here. The fibula is going to be on the outside. It's going to attach sort of underneath and behind the this cap of the tibia. So it's going to come down like this, and then it's going to really sort of teardrop down on the outside. Very narrow bone. Oops. So I would say about here, it's not even 2 eyes width, maybe a distance there from the bottom of your foot up to the outside. But you'll notice that kind of angle there is to the outside. All right, so let's take on the other one. So we'll put a little bit of a cap here on the tibia. All right, a knob to the inside, a knob to the outside. That sort of pointy part of the front is going to angle in and then out. We're going to come down here, strap to the inside. A little bit of flare out there, but again, it's more to the inside where the tibia is going to hang on to the sort of like a strap to the ankle. On the outside here, of course, we've got the fibula that's going to come in with the head there, come down, and more or less teardrop a strap to the outside of the ankle. All right, again, more triangular up here, squarish at the bottom. Let's go and take on the side view here. We're going to have the cap again, and we want to come out quite a bit, right? So there's a little bit of a saddle. That tibia is supporting the weight of the femur. Then we want to flare out to that kneeling point, okay? And then we want to come back down. Now, of course, we're drawing the tibia first, which is going to be to the inside. We're going to have a bit of a knob on the back, coming down, okay? And then we're going to have that strap to the inside, which we're going to cover up in a second. All right, so sort of a strong kneeling point here. And then what we want to do is we're going to put fibula towards the back here, that head, a little more squarish quality to the strap there on top. And then it's going to, I guess I can push that a little more forward. It's going to come down like this and teardrop. So you might see a little separation there between the tibia and the fibula. Here's the needle bone of the fibula. Tibia coming down here. fibula to the outside. All right, let's take on the back view. All right, view from the back. Tibia, platform, get a little bit of a saddle for each of these spools of the femur. We're going to take that big sort of cap on each side, and we're going to come down to the ankle. Remember, a little less than half tall there. Tibia is coming down, strap here, strap to the inside. Okay, spools sitting in those saddles. Tibia coming down, strap to the inside. Okay, so I might have cut it a little better on the left here of the skeleton. Just a little bit more of a room to tuck our fibula underneath there, underneath that cap. And so we'll really see the way the fibula comes up and wraps over the back here. So that would be covered up then. Okay. Fibula coming down, lower than the strap to the inside, the strap to the outside. Okay. And then we'll do the same thing here. Head of the fibula coming up the back, a little more down, and then we want to strap at the bottom in a more of a teardrop shape. Screw that up maybe a little bit. All right, that should get us the lower leg bones. All right, here we go with bones of the foot. Let's divide the foot into two systems, a heel system and an ankle system. So we need to attach the ankle, of course, to the leg bones. The tibia is going to come down and it's going to rotate on this bone here called the talus. And this sort of groove here is called the trochlea. But that's where the tibia is coming down. And you can see that right off of this guy is one called a navicular, and then we got a couple of more here called cuneiforms. You see how they're all connected together? This is supposed to be a ship, but actually it sort of ties into a third one too. So, well, I don't see the ship. Okay, and then on the ankle system, we have the big calcaneus right here, and it creates an arch, right? It's this side of the arch, and keeping that concept in mind, on the inside of the foot, the arch is even higher, right? All the bones sort of go down into the outside. All right, so right after the calcaneus is this sort of squarish bone. It's called a cuboid. Okay, here's our three cuneiforms, but the cuboid hooks into the last two of your metatarsals. Okay, and then you have, of course, what are called phalanges, or each one's a phalanx here, with one, two, tiny little guy on the little toe there. Three of these guys, except on the big toe, you've got two phalanges. Okay, and again, it's sort of the swoop. See how calcaneus comes up, and the talus sort of goes down. So, ankle system, heel system coming together there. Right. On the bottom of the foot here, we have the calcaneus again. But what I want to point out is we have this sort of tripod. Okay. The plantar base here of the big toe, the fifth metatarsal, the proximal end, that's the closest to the middle of the body here, and the ankle create kind of a tripod that we can create our balance on. That's the platform of the foot. All right. All right, I've drawn three boxes here, roughly the size of half of a head. And this is what we're going to fit the foot into. We're looking at the right foot here. Fibula is coming down on the outside, tibia is on the inside. Remember, the tibia is what's going to rest on the platform of the ankle system. And that begins with a bone called the talus. The talus is kind of interesting. They say it has a head, neck, and body, but I think the nicest conception of it is more like a dome. So it has tibia's going to go behind here. It has a kind of a dome to it. And considered the body, and then it has a neck. And that neck comes out like this, something like that. That's the talus. Okay? It'll come out to the first box, so a third of the way across here. Underneath that, supporting it, is the calcaneus. That's the heel bone. Right? So it's got kind of a corner there. It comes back up, just a little maybe shorter than as far out as the talus extends. All right, for the second third of our foot here, this is where we want to, if we divide the box into half here, this first part here is where we want to put the tarsus, the 7 bones of the tarsus, and then we'll take the first, we'll take the metatarsals out. The fifth one will come out to the end of the box right here. Okay, so to put that on something first, we need to draw the cuboid bone here. That's kind of a squarish looking bone that's going to, again, we want to kind of think about rising up and coming back down. So after the cuboid, we're going to have a series of cuneiform bones that are going to sort of sweep around like this coming up. Okay, significantly with this cuboid, right down here on the outside edge, on that 1/3 line, is the fifth metatarsal. So this is your little toe bone. It's going to kind of have this squarish head here, and it's going to have a rod that arches out, and then you want to put kind of a spear on the other end. So it sort of looks like that. Okay, and with this cuneiform, with the cuboid here, what we want to do is we want to hook the fifth and the fourth metatarsals to it, so we can have another one come out here. And this one will hook in too. Maybe go out a little further. And what we want to do here with the little toe is we're going to have this sort of gesture of up, out, and away. Okay? So 3 phalanges. So we're going to have after the metatarsals. So we only want to go about halfway out here. So they get significantly smaller quickly. Cube, rod, spear, cube, rod, spear, cube, rod, and the nail to the toe. Okay? Then we want to go for the second one here. Again, cube, rod, spear, something like that. Okay, working our way up here. After the cuboid, we're going to have a lateral cuneiform and an intermediate cuneiform here. And the lateral one is going to take your third metatarsal out, and then up, out, and away. Okay. Right here, we need to put in the navicular that's between the talus and that intermediate cuneiform. And then from there, we can sweep down 2 and out and away, and depending on how much we're seeing there of the other toes. On the far side here, we'd have the big toe, the first metatarsal. It would come down about right. These toes would start to come down here and out a little bit, the big toe. Let me draw it from the sort of inside view, and that might give us another way to sort of understand this. So I'm going to draw real quickly here another sort of 3 cubes, right? So 1, 2, 3. So looking at this from the inside now, we're going to have tibia come down. Fibula is on the far side, on the outside of the foot. Again, we're going to have the dome or the body of the talus. It sort of comes down a bit more, I don't know, maybe in a bean-like shape on the inside, I think. Still going to have that neck that comes out here. Okay. And then we've got maybe a little cramp there for the calcaneus, but we want to come down, out, a real ball on the calcaneus there, coming back up, and sort of something like that. Now, what happens here on the inside of the foot, too, is there's a platform that the talus rests on that's part of the calcaneus. Then we're going to have the navicular that articulates with the head of the talus. So that's what we want to do is between navicular and we want to arch down here, and our medial cuneiform, we want to get halfway across the box there. So kind of having a quality of coming back down. Remember, the foot has this very much of an arch to it. So on the little toe side, what's happening here is we would have a little bit of the cuboid here. Let's put that in shadow. And then we would hook down here the 5th metatarsal and the 4th metatarsal. This would be going on the far side of the foot. Okay, so after we've got navicular and the cuneiform here, we want to go after the 1st metatarsal. Again, you want to have kind of a big squarish head. We want to land halfway down or across this box here. So the neck and the ball there. Now on the big toe side, we're only going to have 2 phalanges. So 1, and then the second one is sort of the big platform for the big toe. Okay. Now when we see much more, we might see a little bit of the second toe coming down. When we see the intermediate cuneiform, maybe, but let's just put a little bit of that in. Okay. And so the tibia is going to come down, of course, on the strap to the inside of the foot here, fibula on the far side. That should give you kind of a good feel for the construction of the foot. All right, let's take on the foot here. With the starting with the ankle system, we're going to have the talus. Remember, it's got a little bit of this sort of spool shape here that the tibia is just going to sort of straddle across and rotate back and forth on. All right, so that talus, I feel like it has a trajectory where it sort of wants to go in like this, okay? And then we'll see how the heel system sort of wants to come back up this way. But right now with the ankle, what we want to do is create that talus to sort of slope out like this, okay? So it's going to come down and come down. We can do that on both sides, I guess. And with that, right in front of that's going to be the navicular. And we want to think of this as, of course, everything's going to sort of stack up here because it's going to be foreshortened and coming at us. We want to think of this sort of midsection of the foot with a higher arch to the inside, lower to the outside. Okay? And so what this navicular is going to do is there's a little bit of a bump that sticks out here, but it's going to come down this way. And then in front of that, we have 3 of the cuneiforms that attach to that. So we can kind of draw, again, sort of a 1, 2, 3. And these guys, 1, 2, and a little bit of the third one the navicular is going to hook to too. Okay? And then we'll spread that out just a little bit. And then we really sort of take on the metatarsal. So these are going to be really sort of stacked up here, but it's kind of squarish in the back, coming forward, and then we're going to have the phalanges. 1, kind of squarish again, 2, and then the platform of the toe. Okay, with the big toe here, we're going to have that first metatarsal come out. And you kind of want to feel a shape like this. So it's like this with the navicular and then here with the foot. This guy's going to come out, then we're going to catch the first metatarsal, and then we're going to catch the second one, which will have the platform of the toenail on. Okay. And then the third guy is going to come out here off our third cuneiform. Kind of coming up like this. And then we're going to have the first phalange, second phalange, and a platform for the toe. After that, over here, let's just take that navicular ring off of that. Okay. Then what will happen next is a bit of what's called a cuboid here. Comes off the calcaneus, back in there. And the cuboid is going to give us the metatarsals for the 4th and the 5th toe. So then a phalange, a nail, phalange, nail. Okay? And then we can take the same idea on the other side. So we've got this sort of, the talus that the tibia is resting on, and then we're going to have the navicular come down. Again, on the inside, it's going to have a bump out here. It's going to come up and around. It's going to give us enough room to hook onto the first 3 cuneiforms. All right? So we've got one here, and then we'll draw out our first metatarsal. And then we've got the second cuneiform here. Again, we can kind of go after that arch shape coming up here. Second metatarsal coming down. And then we'll just get just enough of the navicular to catch a third metatarsal coming. Third cuneiform to third metatarsal. Okay. Actually, the cuneiforms are called medial, intermediate, and lateral. Then we've got the cuboid coming off the cuneiform back here that will give us enough to hook the 4th and the 5th metatarsals to. And then we just want to sort of stack the phalanges on top of that. So with the big toe here, we're going to have 1. And then we're going to have the platform for the big toe. With the second toe here, we want to have these sort of recede back a little bit. 1, 2, and the nail. Then the third, 1, 2, and the nail. Same idea, just getting smaller each time. We want to kind of have this feeling going back like this, the movement like that. And 1, 2. Okay, and that should do it. Maybe a little bit the calcaneus coming back through here. And that's the foot. All right, let's take on the ankle and the foot from the back view here. Of course, the big bone we're going to see from the back is the calcaneus, right? The part of the heel system, right? The heel. But what we want to do again, I think, is work our way back from the talus and set it up where, if we're really kind of going for the subtlety here, the talus has a bit of a angle like that to it, if you will, when I look at it anyway. And then the calcaneus, the heel bone, has a kind of a feeling like that to it. So when we draw this, so remember this guy kind of spools in the middle, and then it's going to kind of come over like this, and then it's going to spool this way too. Okay? That's the talus. So then that weight I'm talking about down to this side is just simply a shape as you go forward. It has that kind of a feeling to it. Now the calcaneus is going to come right back from that, the talus resting on there. It's going to have a bit of a point to it, and then down and around. Okay? Big platform on the bottom. Then there's kind of this sort of heel shape that you can kind of catch. be an attachment point for the Achilles tendon. And we're going to come down like that. All right. Now, if you remember, there's a bit of this that comes out and supports the talus. There's a little bit of a platform right there. And that's a whole lot of it. So this spools around the talus and it would come back down kind of like that, right? With our tibia on the inside. And that's pretty much most of it. We might be able to catch a little bit of the navicular on this side. And then we might be able to catch a little bit of that first cuneiform, the medial cuneiform hanging out underneath there. And then, you know, we could probably put in a little bit of that front toe if we wanted to, the big toe. All right, let's take the same thing on the other side here. So we'll just kind of reverse this, right? So the talus feels like it's kind of going this way, right? And then the ankle itself, the calcaneus, right? All right, so let's take that on. So again, we're going to kind of spool this out. And again, that's going to spool again, but we're going to kind of take this quality on each side, lower to the inside, higher to the outside. Okay. Oops, I can bring that up a little bit. And then we're going to take on the calcaneus, the heel bone. So we're going to come down, little flare, bump to the outside, big pad at the bottom. We're going to have a little bit of this feeling of kind of coming up, this attachment point, a little bit sharper to the inside, but a big platform on the bottom. All right, then if you remember, we want to sort of swing out a little bit of that we could probably bring the navicular, or the talus out a little bit. We want that talus to rest on that little platform coming out here. And then we might get just a little bit of the navicular coming out there. And we might get a little bit of the medial cuneiform hanging out underneath there. And again, if we wanted to take the first metatarsal, phalange, and another one, we might have a big toe there. Okay, that's pretty much it. That's the foot. All right, let's take on the arm here, and then we'll do the hand. The arm is composed of 3 bones, similar to the leg, 1 upper, 2 lower. This is the humerus, this is the ulna, this is the radius. I'll show you how to keep those straight a little bit, but they move a lot, right, when we rotate our hand around. The humerus is going to be attached into the shoulder here. We have a shallow socket, and we have a bit of a shoulder pad up here. And you can raise your arm about halfway up, and then once you hit that, you're going to start rotating or articulating the whole shoulder girdle, collarbone, back to scapula. And I can't really show you that because this is pinned in, okay? But radius and ulna, okay, well, basically the radius sits underneath this spool here of the humerus, but the ulna is the one that really hooks in to the humerus. I'll show you from the back here. We've got a couple of knobs too coming down on the humerus. Feel like maybe a little bigger attachment point on the outside. On the inside. On the outside we have the radius again. You see this kind of, it's almost like a beak here of the ulna that there's like a rod in there, and this the ulna just wraps around that rod and rotates, okay? And so that's its job for you in your life, is to do this, okay? That's the ulna. The ulna is quite, well here, not to get us confused, quite thick where it starts to the elbow, and then when it gets down to the end here, it's very thin. Okay? So the ulna is all about the attachment in the elbow. The radius starts out pretty thin here and gets much thicker in the wrist. So the radius is all about hooking into the hand. It's all about that attachment point. All right. So we do, besides kind of this and this and this, of course, we are able to rotate our hand over. Okay. So what happens is there's a, sort of a cap here of the radius that rotates underneath this ball here, and it allows you to bring your hand over or back. So medically, those terms are supination and pronation. So the way to remember that is if you go this way, at least the medical students tell me this, that's your soup. You don't want to spill your soup. So this is supination and this is pronation. Okay, all of that's possible because we can rotate the radius over. Okay, so the radius bone is coming down on your thumb side. Okay, so you can maybe follow it up to this. These are called epicondyles. It's this outer one, or the lateral. Medial's on the inside, but the lateral, the outside one, is where your radius comes up to. And if you just bring your thumb over, well, you might kind of feel like that bone, the radius is coming over the ulna there. The ulna, there's something known as the furrow of the ulna. Okay, right in here, and you can kind of see that. Right, so it's a nice depth line that takes you from elbow to wrist. Okay, you might be able to feel the two bumps on your wrist. These are those epicondyles, the thumb side, radius again, and maybe you're going to feel two bumps on the pinky side of your hand. But the big one here is the end of the ulna, and that smaller one is called the pisiform here in the hand. Okay. All right, let's draw this. All right, let's take on the front view here. We're going to put the humerus into the shoulder blade here, part of the shoulder girdle. We're going to put that ball right into the socket. We'll have a little bit of a neck, not nearly as much as we have with the trochanter coming out on the femur. And then we're going to take we'll have a little bit of a knob there, though, and we're going to take the arm down. Now, we'll come in on the inside here. All right, humerus, we want, now maybe how far you're asking, should you bring the arm down? Remember the 10th rib, the real prominent one here, the last one that hooks into the rib cage on the front, comes around on the back? That's the length of your upper arm. Elbow lines up with the 10th rib. So we're going to put a knob on the inside. That's a nice attachment point. We're going to put a ball, more of a ballish shape on the outside, something like that. Then we're going to have a little bit of a rod in there. We'll see that a little more from the back side. Okay, and let's do the other side. Humerus, shallow socket there, the ball coming out through the neck, coming down, and thinking sort of 10th rib length. Get yourself a good knob to the inside, a little bit more of a ballish shape to the outside, and you should be good. All right, so maybe we can jump over, and let's go to the side view here. So let's kind of come down, maybe right here, and then I think I'll take the arm out. So the ball again inserts itself into the gladiolus right beneath the spine of the scapula. Coming forward this way, right, we'll have the head of the humerus, and then we're going to come down to the 10th rib. And remember, as we come down, we're going to have a little bit of this beak-like shape. All right. So maybe if I clean that up a little bit. there. There's going to be a little groove right here that we'll talk about when we do some muscle attachment points. All right, and then from the back view, similar story. We want to put the humerus where it goes in the scapula there. Very short neck coming down. Bit of a ball to the outside. Bit of a knob to the inside. And now here's where we can sort of take that ball and that knob, and we'll have a little bit of a spool right there. This is that shaft the ulna is going to sort of sink its beak around and rotate on. Let's go for the other side here too. Ball and socket. A little bit of the neck to the humerus. Coming down. Knob. Ball. All right, let's take on the lower arm here. What we're going to do is we're going to draw the radius, well, the ulna first, because it's the main attachment to the elbow, and then we'll take the radius from there. Okay, so the ulna, sort of in a medical position like this, sort of the pose we're drawing, the ulna is going to be on the inside, and it's going to take this kind of big shape here. And it's got this quality of where I would say kind of go in and out with it. Okay? And now how far do you want to go? Well, roughly 4/5, maybe I think a little more than 4/5 will get you to the end of the wrist. Okay? So it's that sort of in and out with it. Now as you come down, we can even keep it a little bigger up here. As we come down with it here, we want to get a little narrower and a little narrower. Okay? Let's do the same thing on the other side. So a nice big wide attachment point here. A little bit of an in and out. Okay. We just get a little bump at the end there. All right, on the side view here, the lower arm with the ulna, remember its beak is going to wrap around and sort of rod of the humerus there. So it's going to come off the back. And of course the beak's got to wrap all the way around, so we need to come up a ways and come down. And I suppose we could put a little bit of a arc to that, a little point on the end. Go a little further. All right, and the radius now is going to be underneath the cap here on the outside of the humerus, underneath that outer epicondyle. And then it's going to rotate in. Let's do the back view. So beak of the ulna, very big. And this kind of in and out quality. Oh, a little wide. Just pretty subtle about it, that in and out. Same thing over here. A little bit more of a knob on the inside. In and out. All right, so where is the radius? Radius is going to insert itself under the cap, this outside epicondyle here. So when you draw the radius, you want to put a kind of a cap on there, like that. Then it's going to come down, and it's going to have a bit of a bump right away. And then you want to just bring it down with a kind of subtle S-curve to it. And you want to flare out a big attachment point like this for the wrist. All right. So cap to the radius here so that it can rotate. And then we just want to kind of take it down. Remember, the radius is going to get wider. While the ulna gets narrower towards the wrist. Now I suppose we could rotate one arm over. Why don't we do that here? We'll just take and rotate the radius over the ulna a little bit here. So we're going to turn the wrist and we'll bring the radius across the ulna like that. So I'm at, that first line is down the middle. And we have the ulna come behind then. All right, so that's our left. Over here then, if we want to do that too, we'll have the cap in front here. And we're going to bring the radius down like so. Okay. Next up, we'll put the hand on. All right, let's talk about the hand for a minute here. The hand is composed of 27 bones. 8 are in the carpus. That's this little part here before we get into, I guess, the fingers, if you will. The carpus is what connects primarily to the radius. It's also tendon in to the ulna here. Not that we have to learn all of these bones, but there is a very prominent one you can see here on the pinky side here. And you can find that right after that bump of the ulna. You come down your wrist, the next bump there, that is the pisiform, this guy right here. Okay. The one next to it, towards your ring finger, if you can kind of see that, it's called the Hook of Hamate. It has a really cool sort of attachment point for some of the muscles there, some of the tendons. And it's the one, if you really hit the golf club wrong and whack the ground, that's what you're feeling there, is the Hook of Hamate. All right, well, we'll kind of draw this out. The carpus, of course, has this kind of like U-shaped, cave-shaped, tunnel shape. Right? You've heard of carpal tunnel. That's where it comes from, all the tendons running through the carpus. And they get stressed along the wrist there. We're going to look at the first metacarpals coming off here. This is basically where the springs of the skeleton are, is the end of the skin here where you go into fingers. So the fingers really start here with the first phalange here, okay? And there's 3 on each finger except the thumb. There's 2 there. Okay? All right, so let's see if we can draw this out. Oh, I should point out too that the thumb really comes out of the side of the carpus here. Okay? And so we'll just make sure we sort of take the thumb out of the side. All right. All right, let's go for the hand here. What we're going to do is draw the carpus first, And really, actually maybe getting the distance of the whole hand will help. If you sort of put your hand over your face here, it's about widow's peak in length. Of course, that varies a little bit. So it's almost a head, or maybe say, remember up here, about 6 eyes high. So a little less, or if you want to go the other way, take one of our squares here and add another eye to it. So that's about the length of the whole hand. We could do that here too. Now if you take that length and divide it in half, that will be helpful. And you can also think about this first third of that half. And in that first third of that half, you can draw yourself kind of a apple slice. And that will get you the, and then even on like a view, even if we're coming this way, just a narrower, but we can still, I think, to simplify that carcass, those 8 bones, we can take on a bit of a sort of apple slice. And again, that's about a third of the way down the length of that first half. Okay? And then over here will be thumb out. The thumb's going to come out of the carpus on the side here. And then the other fingers seem to have kind of a common line if you spread all your fingers out. They kind of want to meet, maybe about right here. So what we'll do is we'll kind of mark a spot sort of between the first and second finger there. The index and the middle finger. And we can kind of draw all of our fingers out of there. So what we'll do is sort of go like we're kind of thinking about kind of coming back to there more or less. Okay? Now what does that really look like? Well, we can put in a bit of a kind of an arc there, and that will be the length for the first metacarpals. Okay? And the way you want to kind of draw these bones, we could address it a bit in the foot, is to think about each of these having kind of a blockish end to them. Okay? So it's kind of a square deal here. And then the fingers themselves are going to be more like a rod, so sort of a cube to a rod. Now, on the underside, this will be thicker, narrower on the top. In fact, if we did a side view, we got sort of the cube here. The rod is going to rise on each of your digits. You get a rise in the bone, where the bone comes very near the surface on top, lots of the tendon stuff underneath. And then at the end of each of your digits here is kind of more, simplified a little bit, be more of a sort of a sphere-like shape. So from the side view, or from the top view, okay? So what we want to do is kind of draw that. And these, again, this is all within the hand itself. We're not seeing fingers yet. So, so if you want to kind of go after each one of these guys, it's going to be that idea of kind of a rod, cube, rod, sphere, cube, rod, sphere, cube, rod, sphere. Okay? And a cube, rod, sphere. So of course you want to let the middle finger be the longest. And then it's kind of interesting on a male or a female hand. On a male hand, this fourth finger is going to be much higher than this one. And then we'll take the thumb coming out on this side, we're going to have, just coming out of the side here, the cube, the rod, and the spear. Okay? And then with the fingers, and again, we're going to go twice, so the carpus plus the metatarsals is half the length of the hand. And the other half will be filled with the 3 phalanges. Okay? So it's a cube, and maybe, you know, each one's going to get a little smaller. Cube, rod, spear. And then the last one is going to have sort of this quality of cube, rod. Then it kind of has this, looks a lot like the nail of a finger, right? It's the platform for the nail. Or again, from a side view, might be something like that. Really has the qualities of the fingernail. So, cube, a little bit of rod with the platform of the nail there. Okay. All right, and then we want to go, yeah, that looked a little long to me. Not quite that long. All right, real quickly again, cube, rod, spear, cube, rod, spear, cube, rod, and the fingernail. Okay, so you can do that with all of the fingers. Take on all of the details if you like. Of the cube, rod, spear. Starts to really have the quality of a skeletal hand, doesn't it? Cube, rod, spear. Just maybe about long enough. Cube, rod, spear. And then the difference being in the thumb, instead of 3 phalanges, we're just going to have 1, 2, and the part that holds the nail. Take on the right hand here. So our carpus, well, the position we're going to go after is something like this, with the thumb to the outside. And so our carpus will be located right in here, and it will have a kind of an apple shape to it. It'll be narrower than kind of a slice of apple. Our total distance of our hand is going to be about 6, so a little more than a box, 6 eyes. From carpus to the end of the fingers. So about halfway down is where we want to go with our longest metacarpal. And remember, this way, we'll take this box and about a third of the way there is where we want to be with the end of the carpus. Okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to go after the thumb. Thumb is going to sit in the carpus kind of, well, this way towards the bottom, but this way towards the top of the hand. Remember, the carpus has a bit of an arch to it. Okay, so coming right off of the side here, we'll have a big kind of boxish shape. And then what we want to do is kind of go into kind of an arched rod, and then a bit more of a kind of a spearish end to it. And then we're going to do one more of those. So kind of a rod, spear, on the end. And then we're going to go right into the platform of the thumb. Okay? Something like that. All right, then with the other fingers, starting with the index, we'll start working our way around. So the arch will run this way. So the index will sit on the end of the carpus, and we'll have, again, since we're kind of drawing it in a sense upside down, the arch of the index will go this way. And it will have a ball on it. And then we'll go with another rod and a sphere. Okay, now the difference here is we're going to have two phalanges, well, two in the thumb, but two more here, okay? And this last one here is going to have a bit of a platform for the nail. Okay. All right, so we're a little long here. No, we're pretty good. Index finger coming up. That will be a little bit down again, a little bit longer. And we got the first of the metacarpals here. Second. Okay. And then maybe a ring finger coming back again, coming back on the carpus and underneath. Maybe we'll just catch a little bit of that right here. A little shorter this time. Remember, it's cube, rod, sphere, cube, rod, sphere, cube, rod, sphere. And maybe the pinky sort of just tucked in behind there. I think we got a little long on the thumb. Just going to shorten that up. So generally, with you want to get, with the first carpal here, you want to get just a little bit past, you can kind of see it's just maybe halfway right here, just a little past, sort of roughly halfway there, okay? So I'll just shorten this up a little bit. All right, that looks still better. I'm going to speed up the camera here to save a little time as I'm putting it in the next hand. The main difference is that the radius is coming forward over the ulna, so the thumb is coming forward, the hand is to its side. It's the same pattern though of wanting to do the carpus and the first set of metacarpals halfway along the distance of the hand. You want to have 2 digits after your carpals on your thumb, and then 3 digits or phalanxes on all of your other fingers. Let's take on the left hand here. We'll have the carpus that will mainly attach to the radius here. We've got the arm rotated coming forward a little bit here. So we've gone forward, rotating the radius over the ulna. So we've got pinky side here, thumb away from us. The carpus will be right here. And that's kind of the angle we're going to go for. So, again, the wrist is going to attach primarily to the radius. And a couple of qualities to it. Remember, it has a kind of a cave or tunnel, an arch sort of shape. We talked about the carpus being a bit like a slice of apple. So we want to have kind of that feeling of it. And we also want it to be tucked up into the radius. So let's bring it around just a little bit more, and then we'll have it kind of going away from us like that. And we talked about the hand being about 6 eyes tall, a little bit bigger than one of our squares we've been drawing. Okay. So we can go ahead and kind of mark a length here. Then if we sort of divide that length in half, that will be our longest metacarpal there. And of course, all the fingers are sort of on a rotation where they kind of go around in terms of an axis here. Okay? So we can, if we sort of have that in mind, we can think about the length of what the first metacarpal will be, the pinky here. On the thumb side, it's about the same over there too. So anyway, let's go ahead and go for this here. Of course, our longest bone here would be the middle finger. But let's put on a kind of a rod or a cube sort of like shape to an arched rod and a spear. Okay? Maybe that's a little long. And then our next metacarpal. And then we would have the middle finger there. And our index. And then on the thumb side, coming out of the side here, towards the, closer to us, towards the bottom of the carpus, we would have cube, rod, spear again. Okay. Then on all of the phalanges here, cube, rod, spear, cube, rod, spear, a little shorter each time. I think there's a bit more of a jump between the second and third here. It still looks a little long. All right, let's go for the next one. Cube, rod, spear, cube, rod, spear. And our middle finger, kind of a cube, rod, spear. Little arch each time. Cube, rod, spear. You're going to tuck that a little more behind. And then our thumb, instead of having 3 phalanges, we'll just have 2. Cube, rod, spear, cube, rod, and then kind of a platform for the thumb there. Okay, so the hand going like that, this hand going out. Right. I just want to review here for a minute the major skeletal landmarks of the body that we've been going after here. Of primary importance is definitely that front and back pelvic triangle here on the sacrum with the posterior bumps of the iliac spine, the anterior bumps, the major landmarks there down to pubic symphysis. This will help you get angle and aspect orientation, all of that. Coming up through the rib cage, we talked about the 10th rib being a definite landmark. Okay? And that really should maybe come down to about this line here. If we think about the length of the arms, the condyles of the humerus, the elbow there is going to be about the length of the 10th rib. We talked about the trochanters being important too as a landmark. So you have 2 bumps on the hip from the trochanter and the front pelvic points there. We talked about the sternum coming up here at the where the clavicles meet. We talked about that being an articulation joint. For the shoulder girdle, that's also a nice landmark. It's known as the suprasternal notch, or pit of the neck is another one, but right in here. We also have this articulation here where, well, not so much an articulation, but where the collarbone meets the scapula. The acromion processes, those are landmarks you can find on the shoulder. We talked about the corners of the zygomatic arch here, where you get 3 planes, a down, a side, and a front. That's very important. Mastoid processes to connect to the some of the neck muscles we'll discuss. We on the back side here too, we talked about the scapulas coming up and the spine of the scapula and the sort of triangular way that we'll be able to see that, and we'll be able to see the rotation or the movement of the scapula. Okay. Coming over here on the side view, we've got suprasternal notch, acromion process, 10th rib, front pelvic point. If we were going to draw that in, the front triangle, it would look like this. Okay? Just almost like a straight line down at pubic symphysis. On the back here, we would have from the back, the posterior superior iliac spine down to the cossack sore. Sacral triangle is kind of more on a curve there, but it would be right there. All right. Talked about the trajectory of the femurs inwards, and we talked about the angles of the ankles. We talked about the rotation of the radius. All right, I think that's pretty good. Good.